Grace to you and peace from God our Father and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. For those of you who have seen pictures of battlefields after a fight, you realize how truly devastating war can be. Whether you have in your mind the image of a Middle Eastern city recently ravaged by bombs and missiles, or a World War II stronghold reduced to rubble by air raids, a large field that is caught up in a World War I confrontation, now completely wiped clean of vegetation and covered in bunkers and barbed wire landmines, a battlefield in the Civil War piled high with corpses of young men, really any war, in any place, at any time, where the buildings are leveled, the fields are burned, and the people are slaughtered, and the earth itself is upended. It's a sobering sight, isn't it? It's a devastating scene as you look at the aftermath of an onslaught that was so violent that the landscape itself on which this conflict erupted sometimes takes decades to recover. In fact, some of these battlefields still today are pockmarked with the scars of heavy machine gun and shrapnel and million weapons. And there are a few spots on this map where it's not going to get any better anytime soon, because they're still battlefields. They've been battlefields year after year after year. Old wars drag on. Current conflicts pick up the pace. New fights arise. And these plots of ground seem as if they will forever be the stages of a very real drama where blood is spilled and life is ended and peace is never found. This is Galilee. Galilee is that region in the northernmost section of the land of Israel, originally allotted to the two tribes of Israel called Zebulun and Naphtali. But it became a battlefield. It was a battlefield not just once and not just twice, but over and over and over again for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Why was Galilee a battlefield so many times? Well, it's because of geography. Back during the time of the kings of Israel, the Arameans started to invade the land. The Arameans lived just north of the land of Israel. So every time they came into the land, they hit Galilee first. And as the years rolled by and the Assyrian Empire took over the world, they too came into Galilee because they were living in modern-day Iraq. But they weren't going to send their army across the Syrian desert. They had to come up and around and over and down into Galilee. The Babylonian Empire took over next, and they did the same thing and came down into Galilee first. Then the Persian Empire did the same thing and came into Galilee first. After the Persians, you have Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire, on the other side of the world. He takes his army and comes around the Mediterranean Ocean and drops down into Galilee to get to Egypt. After that, you have the Seleucid dynasty in Syria coming down into Galilee, and then you have the Roman legions from Italy all the way across down into Galilee to get to Jerusalem and beyond. Galilee became a battleground for 1,000 years, and there was nothing that they could do about it. With this background in mind, Isaiah's words here must have had a powerful impact on the people living in the region of Galilee at that time. Here are Isaiah's words again from Isaiah chapter 9. There will be no more gloom for those who are in distress. In the past, he humbled the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the future, he will honor Galilee of the Gentiles by the way of the sea along Jordan. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. of those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. Galilee had been a battleground for centuries because they had to bear the brunt of every invasion and every attack and every raid from the enemies of Israel in the east and in the north and in the west. They were too far away from the major cities of Israel to receive any help. They didn't have the fortifications of the manpower to hold off any sizable force, and so they were very vulnerable. And they were exposed up there. And over the centuries, they became war-torn. But Isaiah's words here gave these people the hope of a victory in Jesus. And if we just had this passage in front of us and nothing else, it would be a little bit of a stretch for us to tie this directly to Christ. But fortunately, we have the book of Matthew, and Matthew makes that connection for us. We read it just a few minutes ago. But Matthew reminds us that when Jesus went into the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, when he settled in Galilee, that was to fulfill this very prophecy from Isaiah. Jesus' hometown was Nazareth. It's where he grew up. And then when he was an adult, he lived in the town of Capernaum. And both of those villages were located in this region called Galilee. It was in Galilee where Jesus first performed his miracles. It was in Galilee where Jesus picked his first disciples. It was in Galilee where Jesus performed those incredible miracles on the Sea of Galilee, that body of water up there that gave the surrounding countryside its name. I mean, out of all of Israel that Jesus could have picked, out of all of those large cities and those famed places in Jewish lore, Jesus decided to fight the war in war-torn Galilee. On the very ground over which so many enemies had marched over the centuries, Jesus taught the people. And he fed the hungry. And he cured the disease. And most importantly, he forgave the sinful. Because this war wasn't physical, of course, it was spiritual. It was an eternal battle in which Jesus was engaged, and he was determined that for once and forever, this fight would end for his people in nothing but victory. But this is not just history. These are not just ancient facts about an ancient people in an ancient place. This is about you. Because we are in the middle of a war right now. Might not seem like it. We don't see soldiers in the streets or heavy artillery on the edge of town. You don't hear air raid sirens going off or the echo of a distant fight over the hills. There's no portable triage units running around town taking care of wounded combatants. No smoke on the horizon. No flashes of a firefight at night. But make no mistake about it. We are in the middle of a war, especially when it's quiet. There's a battle raging on all around us, and there's an internal conflict each inside of us against an opponent who does not play by the rules, an opponent that does not take a break, an opponent that is interested in no truce. We are up against an enemy that wants to do nothing else than to bury us. And yes, the devil is in charge of a demonic army that causes quite a bit of damage. But we also have our own sinful natures inside of us that cause just as much damage, if not more. And it doesn't help when we start to sympathize with this internal enemy. Back in August of 1973, 4 employees of a Swedish bank were held hostage in the vault after a failed robbery attempt. for those 6 days in the vault, some of the captives started to sympathize with the plight of those holding them there. They even told the authorities that they started to trust these men that were holding them at gunpoint and did not want to see them come to any harm. This psychological phenomenon became known as the Stockholm Syndrome. And many different incidents have been reported after that event, especially when people were kidnapped by terrorist organizations or vigilante groups and kept alive instead of being killed. Some of these circumstances, those who were being held captive started to care for their captors. They were caring for their well-being. In some extreme cases, like that of Patty Hearst, if you remember that story, there were people that suicides. People who had been kidnapped began to support and promote the kidnappers. And the reason I bring this up is because we are prone to succumbing to spiritual Stockholm Syndrome. We begin to sympathize with the enemy. We begin to think that our sinful nature really isn't all that bad, because what our sinful nature wants us to do feels good, and it's fun, and it's natural. Our sinful nature wouldn't be doing anything that would harm us, would it? Our sinful nature couldn't be doing anything that would hurt us, could it? And the sinful nature bends close to us and whispers in our ears, "Oh, just do what you want. Make yourself happy. Don't conform to the rules and the expectations of anyone else. Why bother with something that you don't like? Why deal with someone that you don't enjoy? Why put any effort into that which is unpleasant for you, which is difficult for you, which is painful for you?" This is what you have to ask yourself, your sinful nature whispers. What do I want to experience? What will stimulate my senses in such a way and fill my heart in such a way that I feel alive? And whatever it is, do it. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? Doesn't seem so awful or so evil. In fact, it sounds kind of nice. Sounds exciting. Sounds like something that I should be doing a lot more on a regular basis. But don't be fooled. The gun that the sinful nature is holding up to your head is locked and loaded, and it has no interest in your best interest. It is not concerned about your faith or your salvation or your eternity. It only cares about the here and now, the passing pleasures, the momentary joys, the selfish indulgences, no matter how harmful they may be to other people around you, and no matter how harmful they may be to your soul. And we still give in to its suggestions anyway. We still are drawn in by whatever our sinful nature says. And before we know it, we are fighting for the wrong side. And that's why we need Jesus. That's exactly the reason we needed a champion to come to this earth and fight the war for us, because we can't help but fight for the enemy. We were unaware that we were being held hostage. We were unaware that we were in chains. We were unaware that we even had a way out. That's why we needed the Jesus that Isaiah prophesied so long before. And that end of the prophecy that we read in Isaiah chapter 9 might be a little cryptic at first. And what I mean by that is, you might not understand what Isaiah is even talking about, because he's making references that Jewish people would have known about, but we as Christians might not remember. Hear those last few words of this prophecy. "For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor." Do you have any idea what Isaiah is talking about. As in the day of Midian's defeat. Midian is a nation. The Midianites were enemies of Israel way back in the day. And Midian has to do with Gideon. It's an easy way to remember. Gideon versus Midian. Gideon was a great army commander of the Israelite nation during the time of the Judges. And God called on Gideon to help rescue the people from the Midianite control. But God did not want them to take the credit for this grand victory. And so God pared the army down to only 300 men. And Gideon took these 300 men, and he armed them not with swords and spears, but he put a torch in one hand with a clay jar over the top, and he put a trumpet in the other. And he took these 300 men in the middle of the night, and he went to the Midianite camp that was spread out into a valley. Hundreds and thousands of soldiers. And he lined the 300 men on the hills surrounding the camp. He had them break the jars over the torches, and then blow the trumpets, shout a war cry, and sent the Midianite army into chaos. The Lord made sure that this army woke up in such a panic that they turned their swords on each other. And Gideon and his 300 men did not have to lift a finger as they watched this entire army slaughter themselves. That's what Isaiah is talking about. As in the day of Midian's defeat, you, Jesus, have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Just as Jesus took care of the battle then, Jesus takes care of the battle now. And just like any war, there was blood. Not your blood, only the blood of Jesus. Just like any war, there was death. Not your death, only the death of Jesus. Just like any war, there were casualties, and there was sacrifice, and there was honor, and there was glory, but not yours, only Jesus. Jesus successfully made sure that the sinful nature cannot control us any longer. Jesus made sure that the devil was chained up so that he cannot eternally affect our salvation ever again. And the most amazing part about this battle, Jesus forgave us for fighting on the wrong side of the first place. He went behind enemy lines, grabbed us, and pulled us back with him. And now he doesn't hold it against us. He never brings it up again. He simply calls us one of his own. And the darkness in our hearts has been replaced with light. The shadows in our minds have forever been washed away by the powerful radiance of his word. And the blackness of sin has been forever obliterated by the brightness of his love. On these war-torn hearts that have seen countless conflicts over the years and will see many more, Jesus has won the victory. And the victory is ours. No matter what we go through next. There will be some fights to come. There will be some conflicts that you are going to have to survive down the line. But the war itself, that major confrontation between good and evil, between right and wrong, between light and darkness, between our Savior and everything else, is over. With the weapon of his cross and the peace treaty of his tomb, Jesus waits. The field of your heart has been cleared. The battleground of your soul has been secured. And no matter what kind of struggle you have to go through in this life, no matter how hard it is, no matter how difficult it might be, no matter how long it will last, you can know this. The final victory is already yours. Amen. Be still.